Department here, and I guess we're going to open our meeting. You know, Ms. Katzoff and Mr. Berry, Mr. Long. And so if you can just give us a little overview of your department and the budget as being presented to us.
Certainly. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to appear. You'll have to forgive me. I've made some notes and I need to refer to them because I can't remember everything in my head. But the law department, as you know, provides legal advice throughout the entire city. We provide counsel to the mayor, to every city department, to all boards and agencies, and to this body as well. We are responsible for drafting every ordinance that comes before this body, which is roughly 1,000 a year, between 800 and 1,000 a year, depending on what's going on. We review every contract for the city that the city enters into. We handle all litigation of defense claims brought against the city, as well as seeking affirmative claims when there is damage to city property caused by a third party. We appear in housing court. We handle all of your seizures. We handle all of the negotiations for all of your labor contracts and your labor relations. And we do that with a relatively small staff. And as you know, well, let me just hit the highlights first. So the biggest component of our budget, which this year we're seeking $3.8 million, is really salaries and professional fees, because everything we do is supported by, for the most part, legal counsel. So our salaries in-house are $2.24 million, and our professional services that we're seeking is $1.5, which is an increase of, well, it may poke me in the eye, Tim, but.
I'm gonna go here.
So we're asking for an increase of $400,000 this year over last year for our outside counsel budget.
How much more, Sue?
400,000.
400,000?
So let me ask you, you said you're asking for the outside counsel. Is that because you're down people that you're using outside?
It's a combination of things. What we're seeing is we have been short-staffed for some period of time, and we are bringing on new attorneys as we are able. Most often they are young attorneys who need to get some experience behind them, which really limits our bandwidth. We rely on outside counsel when the cases fall into one of a couple of categories. Either it requires a high level of specialization, which the CCH trial, for instance, would be an example of, or it requires an enormous amount of administrative staff. So if there is going to be an overwhelming amount of discovery or document review, we simply don't have the bodies to handle all of that. Or if we believe that it is a very high exposure case to the city, we generally will partner with outside counsel. But what we have done is, in a majority of those cases, it has been our policy to tie a young associate here, a young attorney from our office, with outside counsel, so that that provides them a learning opportunity. It reduces fees for us, but in my opinion, equally, if not more importantly, it provides a training ground where these young associates are getting exposure to very high level legal representation. They are working with someone who is experienced in their field, who is handling a case with a unique set of circumstances. So it's, to me, it's a win-win situation when we can partner like that with and leverage the use of our dollars in that way.
Sue, just not to, you know, just to continue on this line here. So last year we adapted the budget, ended up being 1.1. I hope the budget director's monitoring me on this. And we're projecting at 1.7, which is $600,000 more.
Right.
And now we're only doing 1.5.
Right.
So you're anticipating that you're not going to go
That's what
over
we're
1.7?
hoping. That's what we're hoping. This year we had some pretty big cases that were unexpected that required us to rely more on outside counsel. But we are hoping that going forward we can keep it within the increase we have requested.
Well, let me address the elephant in the room here. Obviously, how much is this the Columbus Monument deal?
I don't have those specific numbers in front of me, but we can
Did
provide
you get them
that
to all the
information.
council, just so we know what, you know?
Yes, I absolutely will follow up and get that information. to
Because, I
council.
mean, it wouldn't be the preponderance, obviously, of this, but I mean,
No.
maybe an increase.
Yeah. I'm sorry, was there another question? Okay. So aside from that, one thing that we do is seek collection of claims when, as I mentioned, there is property damage to the city caused by a third party. So in 2020, we collected about $93,000 as a result of those efforts, but we have dedicated a full-time paralegal to those efforts with the supervision of my office. And in 2021, that increased through her efforts almost exclusively to $233,000, almost $234,000, which are relatively small claims, like somebody knocks over a sign as, you know, they skid off the road. She goes after them, and we hound their insurance companies, and she's been able to over double what was done in 2020. And for the first 3 months of this year, she has already brought in about $117,000. So she's really doing a great job for the city in that regard. We touched a little bit on FOIL. We are getting over 1,000 FOIL requests a year. They are incredibly time consuming. They require a lot of attention to detail so that we are redacting any information that is not permitted to be disclosed under FOIL, any personal information, any sensitive information. We, of course, have repeat FOIL requesters. They don't like the answer they get, they appeal it. We have to process the appeal. Then they get the answer to that, and they come back and they submit a second FOIL request that just shapes the question a little bit differently. So it is a big undertaking, and we are obligated to comply under New York state law with those requests. We have been working with the services of the city to get a FOIL dashboard, if you will, on the city's website. So if you need a simple thing, like you need to know if a permit was issued or certain relatively minor information, you can go and use the portal yourself. And it has been the policy of my office to direct people to that so that it's reducing man hours on our side if they can get the information themselves.
So Sue, let me ask you, so on 125, so is that why you didn't put any FOIL information in the line?
I apologize, I'm not sure where you're looking. Oh, I don't know the answer to that question, I apologize. Does anyone, Julie, do you know? 125. I think it was an oversight, to be honest with you. I can give you the FOIL number. I wrote them down on my sheet,
Okay, great.
or I'm happy to email them to you, but I'm happy to share. So in budget year 2019-2020, we received 1,670 FOIL requests. In 2021, it was 1,625, and we are anticipating that we will come close to that number. As of today, the number is 1,304. So we're not quite through the end of the budget, the fiscal year.
And what staff manages the FOIL? Is it a combination of paralegal and attorneys?
Yes.
Or
It's heavily paralegal driven in the first instance, but they are reviewed by counsel, an attorney in the office before they go out. And the folks who are basically in charge of it in terms of paralegals, they have been trained. They work with our office, they work with SPD when the inquiries involve, police officers or the fire department. So it's somewhat of a well-oiled machine, albeit an awful machine. We are trying to come up with additional software, other processes that would help to streamline it. They've done a great job, before I got here, they've done a great job of trying to save their FOIL responses so that they can track them in a way that if, for instance, Todd submitted a FOIL request asking for material A, and 2 years later, Joe, submits the same request, that we could find it and then just update it as necessary without having to recreate the wheel. But as you can imagine, with this number of requests, it is somewhat unwieldy. So
So 2 questions. One, do you work with API, and can they provide any
They're working with us on
help
this.
with determining what system might be
Yes.
helpful? Okay, good. And the second question is, I see that you've.
Excuse me, I want to tell you that they helped us with the dashboard, like that was when they
Okay.
first started. And so we continue to work with them to try to find other ways to manage the system. So they have always been very helpful, but
Super. And also, you have increased the request of paralegals from 4 to 6. So do you anticipate that's a reflection of the FOIL work and recouping the costs of claims that you mentioned?
I would like to say yes, but my answer has to be no, because we're seeking the paralegals to help support our property seizures, because there is a backlog there and they need support. And getting that logjam undone, coming out of COVID and the moratorium that was in place is really a priority for the administration, so we're trying to put resources there. And then the second paralegal was designed to help SPD and SFD and support our attorney who's handling issues that crop up relative to those 2 departments.
So since we're on that, my brain is just thinking, and maybe it's just, I'm being simple. So when the FOIL request comes in, okay, because I know our biggest department, are they separated by the departments, or are all the requests just thrown in there and you just move through them?
I believe that when a FOIL request comes in, they look at it, and we have a paralegal who works very closely with the SPD. And so I think that to a certain extent, if he's available, he will take that one and run with it. But they are all there to be able to address any that come in, and they do work collaboratively. So I don't want to say that only one person handles FOILs regarding police and only one person handles FOILs regarding permitting. Would you agree with
Yes, I
that
agree.
process?
Okay, well, just my simple little mind, to me, my organization, in my head, it would be a lot simpler to have dedicated people on each different FOIL level, but that's just me.
I think that the FOIL, we can't control who FOILs what. So on one given day, there could be 20 for SPD. So if only one person's doing it, I can't efficiently respond to those in a timely manner because I haven't gotten any regarding permitting or zones or code violations.
And
So
that's the crossover, but okay.
Right, so I want to be able to be as efficient as I can, knowing that I am obligated under the FOIL statute to respond in a timely manner. So I don't want to say, okay, you only ever do SPD and don't you ever touch this and you guys don't touch that.
No, not necessarily saying that, because if you have 6 paralegals and you can separate them out, they would be able to be dedicated, like 2 dedicated to this and this, but anyway.
Right, and at this point, I just don't think we have the right staffing levels to be able to do that, but I do believe to the extent they are able for purposes of efficiencies, they focus on the ones that are most primarily in their area, and then they cross-train when needed.
So, I am a big fan of the law department taking aggressive action to stabilize our neighborhoods. Your predecessor came along fiercely on that at the end, and I hope you carry that on. You got 2 great middle-of-the-lineup guys right there. And so, will you continue to put that as a top priority? Because in the end, that's where the future of the city rests, is how we stabilize our neighborhoods with codes and all. And we have some incredibly complex problems. Todd
Yes.
spent amazing hours on the Geddes Street issue and a few of the other issues, so.
My simple answer to you is yes. I come from...
Because you'll hear from us.
And I welcome that. My background is economic development, as you know, and since I've gotten here, I have inserted myself into the nuisance abatement process. I am now part of that team. We are going to be meeting regularly. They had been meeting regularly anyway, but now they're going to be forced to include me. So I'm looking at all of those issues and working closely with neighborhood and business development and all of the folks in my office to address exactly what you're talking about.
And procedurally, a lot of times it doesn't, the law department does a great job, and they devote as much time as they possibly can, but procedurally, we have the issues with the court system. And the Bureau of Adjudication, which was created by the council and works well, except for at the end, all they can do is put a lien on the property. They
Right.
can't hold anybody in contempt.
Right. We are, give me a few more weeks, but we are looking at the whole.
Because I'm gonna ask you about abandonment.
I know you
too.
do. And I welcome it, and certainly I'll meet with you anytime. I am trying to get my arms around the whole process, from soup to nuts, and trying to marry how things are not done in a vacuum, right? Like, I don't want one part of the administration and the law department to say, well, these are my procedures, and have a sister procedure over here, when if we could marry them, it gives us greater potential to be able to do exactly what you're talking about, which is not only help revitalize the neighborhoods, but enforce the administrative orders that we do issue. So,
We're gonna get along famously, I think, Sue, if that comes to fruition.
I'm sorry.
Oh, almost every previous corporation council, you know, except for Joe.
Well, in that regard, I thought I'd just mention we're requesting 3 new attorney positions, and one of them is specifically for nuisance abatement.
That's great.
Yeah.
So do you need more? Suppose the council wanted to give you a couple more attorneys. I mean, I like the idea of the paralegals, because obviously the paralegals, you know, prepare everything, and I know the difficulty of sometimes keeping and finding lawyers that want to work for the city.
Right.
I mean, has that issue been addressed as far as the salaries go and all that? I mean, how could that be addressed? It's all civil service, right? More
It's
or
all-
less?
The attorneys are not civil service, but there is a residency requirement.
Is that the
And-
big deal, or is it the money?
It's both of those things. To be honest with you, it's both of those things.
Wow.
So I can speak to this personally, because in 3 weeks I'm going to my daughter's graduation, but kids coming out of law school, and my daughter's gonna be graduating graduate law school with well over $200,000 in debt. And to take a position that is starting salary somewhere in the mid to high 50s never gets them out of debt. And then they have to, you know, have city residency requirements. So one of our biggest promotional asks is, if you are someone who is civic-minded, so you want to work in a municipality or in government, you know, there's loan forgiveness. The federal government has a loan forgiveness program that if you work here for 10 years or at any, you know, qualifying entity, your loans are forgiven. So we have some young attorneys who that has been their path, and that's wonderful. And they come and they're bright and they want to learn, and we train them. But not every attorney graduating from law school is that their path. And so those are the challenges we have by getting and retaining people, to be honest with you. We're competing with unbelievable salaries.
Okay, money.
From both here, like if you were an attorney in Syracuse and you just went to one of these big firms, your starting salary is somewhere near $100,000. If you go to Manhattan, your starting salary at one of the big firms is north of $215,000. So, I mean, that's just black and white. That is hard to compete with.
So how do we address that?
Not just in private practice, the county and the state
Right.
attorneys are paid higher than we are.
So you're presenting us a budget that's sort of the same as last year, except for 5 more, but the salaries of the lawyers haven't changed.
That is correct. And as you know, I mean, if we are one small piece of this giant budget, right? And so every professional entity in this corporation has similar issues. But if we raise the salaries for our new attorneys, you have to raise the salaries for your existing attorneys. I mean, you know, otherwise you have compression you can't sustain. So it's that catch-22 situation. I have to say, with all due respect to my predecessor, she did an amazing job at hiring some wonderful young talent. She really did. But we are now struggling. I mean, I've been advertising since I started to try to fill some of these positions, and you know, I did just make one offer to someone to fill a position we had in codes, which is wonderful. He's accepted, but it is really tough to find people willing to, you know, be with us. Not us personally, we're great, but you know. So, I don't know if that answered your question.
It-
So
it
would I love
does,
for you
and,
to
you
give me
know-
5 more? I would be your best friend, because yes, that would make us incredibly efficient. But I'm struggling to fill the ones I have.
Right, that's what I brought it up. I mean, we've heard this before, and the thing is, you're integral to our neighborhoods,
Right,
you know, addressing the issues that are critical.
right.
That we derive, you know, when we have good neighborhoods, when you have people buying houses, you have more, we talk about growth and we talk about revenue, but if you don't have the people that support the neighborhoods, it's,
Exactly. I'm with you.
okay.
So which of your positions are civil service?
Paralegals, all the administrative staff, I think really the only ones that are not, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, are the attorneys.
Correct.
Service. Go on that scale.
So I'm right now am waiting, and this is my first go-round with this, but a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks now, the paralegal exam, the civil service paralegal exam was offered through the county. So because of COVID, I've been told that when that list will be released, could be weeks, could be months, I have no idea. I don't really, because I've never been involved in the system from that side, I don't really understand what the delay with the list is, because it's a Scantron. Okay, but not for me to judge, I guess. But when I get that list, I will go through it and have to determine, is the person qualified? Do they live in the city? That's number one, because if they don't, then they're not qualified. And then I will start at the top of the list of people who are in the city who took the test and see who's available to come in for an interview and try to fill my positions that way. But I also recognize that list may contain 0 of qualified applicants. So I can report back to you, but that's all I know at this point.
That's fine.
So I don't know if you, having never done this before, do you have other questions? Are there other things you want me to cover? We are handling an enormous amount of litigation matters a year, well over 100 each year. This year, we have active 78 cases right now. We had met over 100, but the others have settled or resolved themselves, either been dismissed, we've negotiated a settlement, or there's been some other disposition. Of the 78 that we're handling right now, 12 of them we are working jointly with outside counsel, so we've assigned a young associate in our firm to work with our outside counsel to handle those. We are, our litigation team is doing a phenomenal job in handling the cases before them, both affirmatively and otherwise. So I'm not sure what else you would like to hear about or what else you would like to know, but
Changes the pay rates.
Huh?
Who controls those pay rates?
Civil service. Most of them are controlled by civil
The state.
service.
The city auditor would like to ask you a question, so please prepare yourself.
is there math involved? Because, that's why I went to law school.
Our city auditor, Nader Maroon.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Michigash. Just as a follow-up, some of your points that you raised, you may or may not know I was a former city councilor. So when you mentioned the last point about the CSEA craziness, I totally agree with you because I had never dealt with it before being the auditor. So believe me, I empathize with you. But relative to that, over the years, I've been a proponent of residency. I lived here all my life, pretty much. So I'm in favor of that. So let me put that on the table. And there's ways I think that we can do better recruitment-wise of employees throughout the city. We have something called the land bank. And we have properties that we have that we're turning over to land bank. And I actually wrote the document about how to fund the land bank originally. And it seems to me that whether it's police, fire, law, any department, why don't we take advantage of the land bank property? And while we cannot necessarily compensate dollar-wise to a young recruit out of law school, the idea of providing them a property for free or for $1, with no taxes to be paid for a few years, and then a gradual increase of paying the taxes would seem to me to be address the situation of part of their cost of living. And comparatively speaking to what, I have a son that lives in Manhattan, I know what he pays in rent, but the salaries also do compensate for that if they're in the right profession. Not everybody in New York is that. So, you know, I think we get away from what we can do relative to recruitment and what assets that we have that we can leverage to enhance that recruitment process, because everybody's looking for a place to live, and if they could have something rent-free, mortgage, that would compensate and help pay off those loans. You mentioned also the attorneys, and I'm grateful that you're going to be here and try to get your hands around all of it. It's a daunting task. One of the areas that our office had recently done was a workers' compensation audit, and in the course of that, there are some long-standing claims against the city that need to be settled, and we had recommended in our audit that that be incorporated into the kind of the planning and budgeting of the HR office to settle with, to use the third party PMA to work to get those claims against the city that are longstanding resolved to cut on the cost. And then when you mentioned the idea of the claims office, and you mentioned the young person that's there that's helped out to increase from 93,000 to 234 to currently on track for 117. Karen Felice has been in that office for many years. And again, when I was on the council, I personally helped her to get software that she needed to be able to do the job. And if anybody ever spends the time to go over there and look in that office and see the files and the boxes of claims that are outstanding, it would seem to me that, and I'm glad to hear that you have a full-time assistant, there's been some vacillation of commitment by previous administration and this administration relative to the staff help and assistance. So it would seem to me that if somebody did an assessment, maybe you've already done that, of how many outstanding claims there are there and what the potential dollars that could be realized on behalf of the city taxpayer, it would seem that resources should be applied there because that's a revenue generating opportunity. And I think that would then compensate, help the your department in terms of looking for additional funding. So I think that's really what I had. I wanted to share that with you in this opportunity. I haven't had a chance to meet with you personally because I know Mr. Berry has already put up the roadblock for me seeing you because he says you have so many things. But he's just mad at me because the Yankees beat him 2 out of 3. So, but welcome to the city and welcome to your job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to come see me anytime.
Thank you, Conference.
Are there any other questions, Councilor Green? No? Any questions from the rest of my councilors? So Sue, I think you passed your first initial test here.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Do my
concise
best.
presentation.
Please let me know if you think of questions later. Email me, come by, whatever you need. I'd be happy to talk to you to the extent I know the answer, and if not, I'll find it. So,
Thanks, Sue.
thank you.
President Hudson wants to put the
President
horn.
Hudson, you have to give the sign off.
WCNY, we're done.
Sign